Alright, let's talk about this. Let's talk about Nova. Not Nova, Lumen. I mean, in a sense, it's Nova. Lumen, all that sort of stuff. Um, I have been working on my own, a couple of different projects that all use what I've been calling LUMEN 2.0. And these are just things that I've been doing on my own. I haven't actually written LUMEN 2.0. I don't have a creator kit out there like there is for LUMEN 1.0, I guess we would call it. So, and I've had people ask me, where's LUMEN 2.0 or when is it coming out? Because they want to do stuff with it. They've seen some of the stuff that I've been working in LUMEN 2.0, like Hunt is the first thing that's released with LUMEN 2.0, even though it doesn't have an SRD out. And I've always just told them, I don't know what it is yet. I haven't actually written it. And so why not actually try to write it? Why not try and think a little bit about what LUMEN 2.0 is? That's the goal for today, is to kind of outline some of that stuff to try and figure out, okay, what exactly do we feel like this nebulous idea of a system actually is. So let's pull up old Lumen just to get ourselves. Here's the itch page. I was trying to remember when the first Lumen came out. So the first Lumen came out April 11th, 2021. So, you know, we're a couple months out from the 3-year anniversary of Lumen. You could make the argument that Lumen existed before that by about 5 or 6 months when I released the first version of Light, just because some core elements of Light became what Lumen was. But I still think those are, you know, they're distinctly different things. And that Lumen is the attempt at writing the system. It's the creator kit. Now this says apparently that I updated it August, and I don't know what I would have updated. I don't know what I would have changed. So, other than like this development log, which is Hunt coming out. I was even looking back at like, when does Lumen 2.0 start happening? And like Hunt was a thing that was July of last year, which actually feels way further away than I thought. And then like, here's somebody 202 days ago asking, hey, where's Lumen 2.0? Is it different? And me going like, I don't know what it is yet. So here it is. Here's Lumen. I think part of this process of talking about what Lumen 2.0 is going to be helpful in like going through what Lumen 1.0 is and talking about what of that stuff still sticks, what of it still feels good, and what feels like it could go, you know? But I think before we get into like going through Lumen and thinking about like what stays, what doesn't, all that sort of stuff, I want to kind of have some like high concepts to talk about here. Let's set that. High concepts is that this is not a brand new system. It's an evolution of the existing one. All right, so I'm not looking to make something new, like brand new, totally new everything. There's going to be a lot of changes, but it's still like at its core the same premise. Like, so, which means we are still highly inspired by video games. I think even more so than before. I think we're even more inspired by video games with Lumen 2.0 in terms of how it works than Lumen 1.0. I think Lumen 1.0 was informed by the games that I had been playing at the time, the ones that I had had the most fun with, which means we see things like the range of success and dice rolling, because I had been playing a lot of Blades before that and having a great time. And I know Blades didn't invent that, but that's what I am associating it with, just because that's where I was seeing it the most often. So, you know, I was kind of thinking about existing games that I was playing with at the time, and thinking about how they would map up with my sort of desires in a game. Other high concepts is that I think this is still mostly about fighting. I don't think this is going to suddenly be this massive departure where it's not about fighting things. You can certainly make Lumen games that have no fighting in them, and you know, there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just not what I do. I don't know. I guess it's just what I like in games. And then other high concepts that we're going to kind of keep in mind here is that we're going diceless for sure. We're going diceless, and then there's like some thoughts on other things that are going to be shaved away, like health possibly going away, drops maybe going away. We'll see. This is about making slim and focused games that do a particular thing very well, but aren't suited for an everything campaign or game. Right? Just like you shouldn't play D&D as a romance game. Like, that'd be a fool's errand to do. You shouldn't play the Lumen games in these other ways, because they're not designed for that. I think these are some of like the big main high concepts. And then from there, we can kind of start diving into what exists and what doesn't exist. So, you know, let's go through Lumen and think about all this stuff. And let's start with dice and the core mechanic. So let's dive into the core mechanic. Lumen 1.0, what did you do? You rolled dice. You would roll dice based off of your attribute, renaming attributes. And then you would keep the highest range of success. Here it is. That tells you how it shakes out. And I think I'm just getting rid of that. It's diceless. So, you know, no more rolling dice anywhere in the game. That's the thing that we have to kind of keep in mind, because there are other parts of the game besides the core mechanic where dice would manifest, like drops, and we have to think about how you update those with a system that is then diceless. Let me actually just kind of talk about this concept of diceless and like diceless for sure. In a sense, this is skill-based. But not like a skill list that you would see in an RPG. I mean skill as in the player skill. Which is like a concept that you see in OSR games and stuff like that, where like your characters don't have like a lot of stuff to make up the character, but it's about like what you as the player kind of figure out. I like that concept, right? Rather than having a big list of things that tell you what your character can do, it's more about what you as a player can think about and figure out that you want to do. And what I mean by the skill-based stuff besides that is like almost all of the video games that I enjoy don't have randomness as the resolution of the core mechanic. I should just kind of like put this down here, actually. None of them do. And what are the games that inspire Lumen? It's things like Destiny, right? It's looter shooters and things like that. Where, sure, there might be like small bands of randomness in like a weapon can do somewhere between 18 and 20 damage every time you use it. But it's still gonna do it pretty much every single time. It's about aiming, right? Which is a skill thing. It's about deciding where to move your character on the screen in the space. That's a skill thing. It's not random. It's not saying, okay, I have a 60% chance at hitting this particular thing. There is skill involved in those sorts of games where you then try and put yourself in a situation where the percentages are best in your favor, but like, I don't get a lot of joy out of doing that. And like, it sounds like you're already trying to basically get to the point where randomness doesn't matter in those games by putting your characters in scenarios where their percentages are extremely high. So like, I don't feel compelled to keep randomness as a component of core mechanics. And I want to kind of just keep talking about that for a little bit, because I've seen people go like, what's the point of a role-playing game if there's no randomness, right? Like, how do you resolve things if there's no randomness? And I think that's a really interesting idea that people have of, I don't understand how you could do something without having a randomizer to decide whether or not you succeeded or not. And like, I think about kind of two things when I think about that. One is, again, video games, right? Like, again, most of the video games that I play, it's if I'm aiming this weapon or I'm aiming this gun in Destiny at a character and I push the trigger button, I'm gonna hit them as long as I've aimed correctly. And that's all me. It's not a randomness. There's no chance that I hit or that I miss. It just is gonna happen. And millions of people enjoy video games. So like, why do role players struggle with the idea of that you can have fun if there's no randomness? That like, you need somebody to like arbitrate the success of your character. And it can't be you. It has to be this thing. That feels silly to me. If you like randomness, that's fine. But to say that you can't do it is absurd. The other thing is, I talk about this a lot whenever I like get on shows where I'm interviewed and stuff, and I talk about my origin point in role-playing games is through playing with improvisers. And improvisers can tell amazing stories without needing a randomizer to tell them what they're going to do, right? They might have a random prompt from the audience to get them started, but once they begin play, they don't need a randomizer anymore. They can just tell stories, and they can just build. They can collaborate, and they can challenge each other without needing this arbitrary sense of randomness. So basically, I gain nothing from having randomness be the arbitrator of success, and I push back against the idea that you need randomness in order to have fun or play an RPG. I just don't think you need it. It's okay if you like it. That's the thing that I want to kind of continue to emphasize as I'm going through this, is like, I am designing a system to make games that I would play. I'm not making a system that is designed for everybody. If you are the kind of person who likes randomness, you probably won't enjoy this at all. And that's fine. So if there's no dice rolling, then like, how do you do things, right? Well, how do you do things? How do you do things? A conversation is how you do things. You do things by having a conversation and talking to each other and building, right? And then you use the approaches, new name for attributes, when the conversation takes you to a place where there is risk or, you know, substantial weight to an action where it seems like a toll must be paid. Basically, anytime you would expect to roll actually, I'm not going to say that. Not anytime you would expect to roll dice, because there's so many games where you are rolling dice way more often than you need to. Just because you feel like you have to, right? Like, you do something relatively mundane, and the GM calls for a roll just because it just feels like you have to do it, right? Because somebody tried to do something, so just, oh, I don't know. You tried to do something, so we got to see if you do it or not. Again, that just feels kind of silly to me. And so you use approaches. The renaming is more appropriate, right? They were originally called attributes, but they're not attributes. They're not like your character's strength and wisdom and dexterity and stuff like that. That's not what they are. They are kind of that, in that they represent how you typically like to do things, but they, you know, they really represent how you approach, hence the name approaches, obstacles. They are just simply a representation of how you are approaching things. So you approach things with great force, you approach things with flow to move around them or be quick about it, you approach things with focus. It's not, again, a measurement of your character's strength or wisdom or anything like that, because I ultimately think that's not helpful. I don't think it's helpful to have a measurement of strength or intelligence, because those things fluctuate so much in terms of how they might manifest, right? Having attributes or stats fails to represent those things all the time, right? Let's take intelligence. Intelligence as a stat is a terrible idea, because it's really, really hard to measure intelligence. And because intelligence manifests in so many different ways. I'm saying this as a cognitive psychologist who literally studies this kind of stuff. Like, IQ tests are garbage. Most intelligence tests are garbage. They're not a helpful means of telling you how smart someone is. And we know that people can be smart in one situation and not as smart in another situation. So to just give somebody a stat that says this is how intelligent you are doesn't work. That also applies to things like strength, right? Strength is cool as like a measurement of like how strong somebody is, but like how one manifests strength is differently. Look at the show Physical 100, which is a Korean game show on Netflix that takes the 100 of the fittest people in Korea and pits them against each other in physical acts of strength. And you would think, oh, the bodybuilders are going to win. They're the strongest. And yeah, they'll win some of the challenges. But one of the very first challenges is hold yourself up on a bar for as long as you possibly can. And guess what? The people who are really big and strong are not good at that because they're so heavy. The people who are really good at that, gymnasts, light people who have a different kind of strength. So if you have a stat that just says strength, and somebody's got a really high stat strength, what does that mean exactly? It doesn't mean anything. So I don't think we need stats, and I don't think we need attributes. I think approaches is the more appropriate thing. Okay. There's going to be a lot of this in this stream of me just kind of going into deep dives about design and why I think things work the way that they do or don't work the way that they do. So what does it mean to then use an approach? Each approach has a score, which is a number of times you can use that approach during a session. When you attempt something and it's weighty or risky, you will be called to use an approach. GM says which one fits based on your description of what you're doing, which is pretty much how attributes worked before. But instead of rolling dice, you spend the approach, you know, reducing value 1, and the action is completed. Done. You don't need a randomizer. It's just done. Or the other options are you spend a different approach, also reducing its value by 1. Action succeeds, and there is a minor complication added to the scene. Or you spend no approaches, action succeeds, and there is a major complication added to the scene. What is this telling us? This tells us that action, narrative, fiction, whatever you want to call it, always moves forward when attempting things. Which is kind of a thing that's already baked into a lot of rolling mechanics, where people say, like, yeah, you should fail forward, meaning when somebody fails something, it shouldn't just say no, like something happens. But I genuinely think failing forward means, like, no, you succeed. It's just you almost wish you hadn't succeeded. Because of the complication that gets added to the scenario. So it's always moving forward. Your characters are very capable and or suffer consequences for pushing forward when they shouldn't. It also tells us that the approaches are a representation of the wearing down of the characters, like, mind, body, and spirit. That's actually the, like, what I say that phrase or something kind of like that every time I try to sell somebody on Hunt at conventions. Because they see Hunt and they go, oh, this is a one-shot game, cool, it's about knights, cool. Wait a minute, it's diceless? What does that mean? And I tell them, it's about your knights spending away their mind, body, and spirit as they try and push their way through a forest. It is a resource management game. It's a resource management game rather than a randomization. Random. Yeah. It's just a resource management game. I don't really want to say it otherwise. At a very surface level, and there are differences even then, this is like the action game version of the investigative abilities of the gumshoe system. Not familiar with that at all. But yeah, I mean, probably. There's probably other games out there that are doing similar things. So that's the core mechanic. We have thrown away dice. We have renamed attributes to approaches. We're spending these things like a resource. This is what we see in Hunt, right? But also, in getting rid of the dice here, that means we have to keep in mind how we get rid of dice everywhere else. Alright. We've gotten through one section so far, the core mechanic, which I think is a big one, obviously, to take care of. Attributes, like we said, that's still there. It's just approaches instead of, classes. Interesting. Classes is really kind of like characters rather than classes. Let's talk about it in terms of characters. Because I know, like, even in Lumen, I eventually talk about a la carte, like classless sort of things. So I don't think that you need to have classes. I know I'm used to making classes in a lot of games, but I don't think you need them. So what is a character then? Right? What is a character in Lumen 2.0? This is where it gets really hard. There are approaches. I know that much. That much I know. And then from there, it kind of deviates a lot. Because Lumen 1.0 had health, the resource, powers, equipment via weapons and stuff like that. So, like, what does that all look like in Lumen 2.0? So, let's consider each of the components of a character in Lumen 1 and think about what stays, goes, and changes. Health. I think I want it gone. I think I want to get rid of health. Let me explain. So a character in Lumen has... Hey, Monwad, yeah. Character in Lumen has health. And original Lumen has health. And I think I just don't want to do health anymore. Like, I'm probably gonna go back and change Dusk so that you don't have health anymore. I guess here's what I think I want to go on for the key seats. Not necessarily the enemies. Depends. Yeah, I want to get, let's talk about what health means in role-playing games and what's good about it, what's bad about it, and things like that, right? Hit points. People argue all the time what hit points represent. Do they actually represent the amount of times you can get hit? Do they represent more like the wearing down of your character until they actually get hit with that final blow, right? Like, you lost 5 hit points, but you didn't actually got hit, but instead, like, you know, you're getting tired from dodging and blocking and all that sort of stuff. Either way, it's a representation of your character getting close to death. The thing is, the thing about health and hit points, I'm just going to use those interchangeably, is that the only one that matters is 0. For most games, right? The only change in hit points that ever matters is going from 1 to 0. There are games that don't do this, but most of them that have health, it is, okay, I have 20 hit points, and I just lost 3. Okay, nothing has changed about my character. Nothing. Absolutely nothing has changed about them other than I have 3 less invisible things in the background. I don't care about my health until it goes to 0. And now I care about it suddenly because I don't have any of it. And that means my character's dead or dying. Which creates these scenarios where health in games becomes this big bag of shit that you have to fight through. That you just have to push and push and push through. And it's really boring. Right? Like, anybody who has played any D&D combat that's at even slightly high levels knows exactly what I'm talking about. Where you're just swinging your sword and hitting again and again and again until the thing eventually dies. Or, to use a non-RPG, to look at video games, right? Look at a video game and look at a boss that's just a bullet sponge and it's not fun to fight. It's just like, okay, we just have to put an exorbitant amount of bullets into this thing for it to die. Nothing changes about the fight until the thing is dead. And it's just pumping it full away. It's not fun. So, you know, creates scenarios where you have bullet sponges and whoa, what am I thinking? Extremely stale combat. I swing my sword again. Not fun, right? So let's just get rid of it. Now we'll talk about what it means to get rid of it for enemies if we get to that today. But what does it then mean for a what does it mean for a PC to get hit then? Like, what do they lose when they are attacked in combat? That's a great point, right? To take it a step further, what's health but another resource that when depleted results in a failure state? Exactly, right? It's just one more resource that's being managed. And it's not a particularly interesting resource. Right? It's a resource that you have little control over. Unless you have like a bunch of healing stuff. But like otherwise, it's a resource that you don't really get to manage so much whether or not it's being spent. It's just how you're getting attacked. And again, you don't really care about it until it's gone. So what does a PC getting hit mean? How do we attack the characters? We attack their approaches. That's how you do it. Right? So approaches act as a stand-in for health as well as your ability to do things outside of combat. Now, I've had conversations with people about this, which is like, oh man, if approaches are also your health, then people won't want to spend them outside of combat. That's an important point to keep in mind, right? How do you mitigate stuff like that? You give people more approaches, you give them ways to recover their approaches. Or you use things like armor, which are like essentially health, right? So that can kind of absorb like 2 hits before your approaches start going down. The other thing is, here's how I think about approaches getting attacked. When an approach gets hit, you don't necessarily lose a use of the approach. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say you have 2 of 3 force left, right? So your character has 3 force. You've used 1 prior to combat. You just got hit, and it's taking out a force. Oh, my dog just barked a bunch. Maybe the UPS thing is here. Maybe the brief books are here. Let's say you have 2 of 3 force left. Your force gets hit. What happens is your maximum force decreases by 1. Meaning you still have 2 uses. Your max is just lower. That's spooky. That's scary. But that's good. It's good. Now you're worried about getting hit. Because it could reduce the number of uses. Because if you're at maximum of a attribute or approach and you get hit, yeah, use goes down with the max. But it doesn't then make people go like, ooh, I don't want to spend my approaches because then I won't have the uses come the fight. No. You should spend them outside of combat because it's not your uses that get depleted, it's your maximums. So like now you're like, oh, okay, I've spent a bunch of my flow. I can take the hits to my flow. It means I can't recover as much of it after this, and I'll have to figure out ways to like get my max back up, which is a thing that we would have to kind of factor into health. But that's I think how you solve the, how do we prevent people from being scared of spending their approaches outside of combat, is you say, you can spend them all you want. That's not what you're gonna lose. your max goes down. Which means we need a way to recover our approaches. Jesus. Oh my god. Both in the uses and in the max. That's something that we just kind of have to keep in mind with the design. Maybe that's what drops will serve as. Okay, so we've removed health. Health is no longer a thing. We got rid of it. Great. What about the resource then? What are we going to do? What are we going to do when we have a resource in the game? I think we get rid of it. Or we don't fully get rid of it. Here's the thing to keep in mind about health and resource. In most Lumen games, at least the ones that I've made and a lot of the ones I've read, when your character is made, when you're in character creation, one of the earliest steps is deciding how much health you want versus how much resource you want to start your character. And resources are the thing that you spend in order to access your powers. So you need this in order to do the cool things that you do in combat. And so it's an interesting decision because it's like, okay, if I focus more on health, I won't die as much, but I have to be kind of careful about how I spend in combat versus if I have a little bit of health, I can die a lot, but I'm not worried about like spending ammo effectively. But if we've just removed health, then that decision tree is gone, right? We're no longer thinking about the role of, or that dynamic between how much resource and how much health. This is no longer a resource. It's not something you spend. The name of the game of Lumen 2.0 is Simplify, Simplify, Simplify. That should go back up here to the high concepts. I have it here, Slim Focus Game, but it truly is like simplify, simplify, simplify. I want a system that is learned so fast and played so fast. Sessions are also fast. I am almost 36 years old. I do not have time for 4-hour sessions anymore. Friends don't have time for it. We just simply don't have time for it. And so, we need things that go quick. We need games that are fast. So I need to just start removing the fluff. Health is fluff. Resource, fluff. We don't need it anymore. It's not something that you spend. This is instead a limiter on your ability to access something else in the game. Not sure what that is yet. Some examples. In Dusk, you have a cell value. This determines how much sun tech you can equip. But you don't spend this to use the sun tech. Once equipped, the stuff just works. Sometimes you might need to spend an approach to use it, but otherwise, it works. Right? Here's why, right? Here's, example 2, by the way, it could be a representation of load, right? Like how much you can carry. In Nova 2, it is your capacity. I don't know about the name for that. This is like Dusk, determines the number of powers and mods combined however you want your Spark can equip. So, glimpse into Nova 2 here. Your character might have a capacity of 6. Each power that your Spark has takes 1 capacity. Each mod takes 1 capacity. What does that mean? It means your Spark could have 2 powers and 4 mods if you wanted. They could have 4 powers and 2 mods, or any other combination of those things. You get to decide the sort of like weird cognitive load that you're going to take on with your Spark. You might just want to have 2 powers that you're super, super good at. And so you choose 2 and you have a bunch of mods that support that or make your Spark cooler. Or you might want a lot of different things that you can do. So you choose a bunch of powers, but they're not boosted as much with a bunch of mod support. I got distracted. I was going to say earlier about, like, why? Why are we doing this? Why do this? Because resource in Lumen 1 was either useless or not fun to track. What do I mean by that? Useless. You basically got it back all the time because of drops. You would always get your resource or health back. Like, very rarely did you ever run out of fuel in Nova. It's very hard. You would get the stuff back all the time. And so, like, why are we tracking it if you're going to always have it? And then, the not fun component is, if you did run out, you suddenly were not having fun. Right? A Nova Spark that has no fuel can't do anything fun in combat. Or they can, but you have to, like, play around with the approaches and everything. And then you have to wait. You're waiting for an enemy to die and drop fuel so you can use your powers again. So it's either not fun or useless because we're not there's no point in tracking it. Right? I think about it in terms of, like, tracking ammo in games. Like, I just can't imagine ever wanting to track ammo if I'm like a ranger in a fantasy game. What a nightmare that would be, right? I think about Destiny and how if you travel far enough back in the timeline of Destiny, you had ammo that you had to collect for every type of gun. Nowadays, your primary weapons, the like kinetic weapons, have no ammo. You have unlimited ammo with these things. You never have to think about finding more of it, right? That's good. Because all I want to do is use the thing. I don't want to think about when I spend it. The other types of weapons, your special weapons and your heavies, those have ammo because they're special by name. So, like, sure. But, like, the stuff that you do all the time, no, I don't want to track that. So we won't. We simply won't. Let me just check one thing real quick, because I heard my dog bark, and I want to make sure that it is not the, it is. Reap has been delivered. Ooh. Woo! Some of it has. There's still more of it coming, but... Alright, I'll do that after stream. We're gonna have to do multiple Lumen 2.0 streams, because we're already at like 50 minutes and we've only gotten to the resource. Okay, so what is a character so far? It's your 3 approaches, still like those. They're being spent rather than rolled. They're also being attacked as a form of your health. The resource is no longer a resource, which means it needs a new name, but it is a supplier of your access to whatever the important thing that makes characters in your game. So in Dusk, it's access to the tech that you have. In Nova, it's access and customization to the powers and mods of your particular spark. All right, what's next? Powers. This one's hard to make a total judgment call. Powers are hard, right? Hard to make a call on this. Because, like, Nova has powers. You don't have all of them. You choose which ones you have. Thorn has them, kind of. Dusk doesn't have them. It's just your equipment. Really, a character now is a combination of a few different things instead of a suite of like 3 to 4 powers plus a passive. That's what a character used to be in Lumen, right? It's here's your passive, here's your like 3 or 4 powers that you're really good at. These are the buttons that you push over and over again. Go have fun. It's I don't know, it's more complicated than that, right? Dusk. Dusk is you have no powers. You just have the sun tech you choose. So equipment is the thing that matters. Nova. You have powers. And they are distinct to your spark. But you don't have them all. You choose which ones are like loaded up before a mission. Thorn. It's really more a big pile of talents than anything else. Some weird combination of powers, passives, narrative boons, equipment. That's all over the place. So I don't really know what to say about powers in Lumen 2.0 other than, like, they're there, but they're not there at the same time. What did I have for other character features? Passives, melees, that was all because of light. Then we get into character creation. Okay. I think this is a good stopping point for, like, our first round of what is Lumen 2.0. And, like, it's largely about who you are, right? Not necessarily, like, what you do, right? We haven't tapped into that idea of, like, what does combat look like? And what's the loop look like? Is it still a loop and all of that? Because that's very much what Lumen 1 was. So I think we got some good like general concepts. We'll come back to this soon. I don't know when I'm going to do my next design stream, but hopefully this has been insightful to kind of get some ideas about what Lumen 2.0 is. I'm excited about it. I'm glad to finally be like thinking about this and instead of like making it piecemeal in a bunch of different places. So if you have questions about this, you know, just reach out or anything like that. I'm happy to try and answer them. Although, who knows? I don't have any solid answers right now. We're figuring it out. So have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.